I worked the Xochimilco docks because the pay was cash and my uncle knew the guy who ran the boats. I showed up with a clipboard, a whistle, and a cheap first aid kit, and my plan was to load families, keep drunk tourists from falling in, and clock out before the late-night party boats got stupid. I was alone on my section because the other kid quit last week. I kept rubbing sanitizer into my hands because the canal water always leaves a film. Around noon, a group of foreigners showed up with a ring light, a gimbal, and that hungry look people get when they want content. They didn't buy snacks, didn't ask about routes, just kept saying the Doll Island like it was a haunted house ride. One of them flashed cash and asked for no guide, no stops. I told them that's not how it works. They laughed like I was scenery. I tried to keep it professional, but it got under my skin because they kept the camera pointed at me, waiting for the moment I snapped. I looked back at Victor, my boss, and he was posted up in the shade with his arms crossed, doing that stare that means, "Don't drag me into this, just load the boat and shut up." I told him with my eyes, "This is a bad idea." He answered with a shrug like he'd already spent the money. So I loaded them anyway, because my boss was watching and sent a guide with them like policy. Rafa took them, and I watched them treat him like a prop, shoving the ring light near his face, laughing when he squinted, talking over him like he was background noise. 10 minutes after they pushed off, Rafa came back alone, moving fast, face tight, saying they'd jumped off at a bend and told him to fuck off back to the boats. He was shaking with anger and embarrassment, like they'd slapped him in front of everyone. He asked me what I promised them, and I barked back that I promised them the same rules I tell everybody. They just don't hear rules when they're holding a phone. We argued right on the dock, sharp and ugly, because families were staring and Victor was staring harder. That's when it turned from annoying into dangerous, because the canals look cute until you slip and the mud sucks your shoe off. The water isn't a pool. It's slow, brown, full of weeds and trash, and it steals your balance the second you stop respecting it. If one of those idiots fell in while filming, I'd be the one hauling them out or calling it in or getting blamed when the clip hit the internet. I went to Victor and told him we had to go get them. He didn't even fake concern. He just hissed that if the island caretaker complained, the route would get shut down and he'd lose money. I told him to come with me then. He said he wasn't leaving the dock and that I should handle my tourists. Then he grabbed my sleeve and warned me, low, that if I made a scene again, I'd be the next one quitting. My hand shook, not from fear, from rage. I grabbed another boat, took a long pole, and pushed out with two older guys who actually knew the water. Before we pushed off, I stuffed the first aid kit under the bench and grabbed a life ring that always smelled like mildew. Victor saw me loading up and started barking that I was wasting fuel. I told him to write me up then. Ernesto came because he hates bullshit and he hates paperwork more. Shava came because he doesn't like leaving a problem behind. On the way out, my radio kept cutting, just static and little bursts of other guides yelling over music. And I remember thinking, if something happens out here, nobody hears you clean. We found the foreigners trigeneratide off near the island, music blasting from a Bluetooth speaker like they were at the beach. I stepped onto the Chinampa, and my shoes sank into wet soil that stank like old plants and sewage. The dolls tapped and squeaked above my head. The wind kept pushing their speaker music through the trees, and it sounded wrong there, like somebody blasting a party in a cemetery. Their bags were open on the bench, gear everywhere, like they couldn't imagine consequences. They were already on the Chinampa, weaving between hanging dolls, laughing, filming close-ups like they were hunting trophies. One guy yanked a doll off a tree and waved it at the camera. Its head came off in his hand, and something wet inside slopped down his wrist. He froze, then freaked, wiping at his skin like it burned, smearing it up his arm, cursing and gagging when the smell hit. His friend didn't help, just shoved the lens closer, hungry for the reaction. Another guy kicked through a pile of discarded dolls behind the shack and found a small shoe, child size, stuffed with old canal weeds. He held it up like a prize and laughed like, "Look what I found." And that laugh made me hate him more than the smell. That's when one of the caretakers appeared from the trees, quiet as a shadow, holding a machete at his side like it wasn't a big deal. He didn't shout. He didn't wave. He just stared at what they'd taken. The foreigners didn't back up. They argued, loud, aggressive, like volume makes you right, pointing at their phones and acting like they owned the place because they traveled to it. The caretaker didn't swing. He stepped closer and pointed at their boat with a machete tip. Leave. Now. They tried to push past him anyway, shoulder first, like he was just another obstacle for the clip. I jumped off the Tragenera and got between them because I didn't want someone bleeding out on a tourist horror island while I watched. One of them shoved me hard in the chest. I shoved back. He lifted his phone in my face and started demanding my name, like a threat, like he could dox me and win. I told him to get on the boat and stop acting like a fucking toddler. Ernesto stepped up behind me and put a hand on the boat rail, ready to yank it out from under them if they kept pushing. Chava stayed half on, half off, pole raised like a warning sign. The caretaker finally snapped and slapped the machete flat against the wood post hard enough to split bark. The crack cut through everything. Even the speaker went quiet like someone paused it. That sound flipped them. They ran. Not brave anymore. They scrambled onto the Tragenera, shoved off messy, nearly dumped themselves into the water. One slipped and windmilled his arms, and I had this mean little thought, good, fall in, learn something, but Ernesto grabbed the side and steadied it because we weren't there to watch idiots drown. We herded them back like stray dogs, pushing them down the channel while they muttered about lawsuits and assault and kept filming like filming was the only way they knew how to breathe. The guy with the wet wrist kept rubbing it and staring at it, like he expected blisters to rise. Back at the dock, they acted like victims, filming me, filming my face, asking my name like a threat. At the dock, they didn't just film me. They filmed the boat numbers, the signs, the faces of anyone who looked at them wrong. One of them stepped close enough that his phone almost touched my cheek, and I slapped it away, not hard, just off me, and he shouted like I'd punched him. Victor jumped between us and apologized to them while glaring at me like I was the criminal. They tried to crowd me, and I kept backing up until my shoulder hit a post, whistle digging into my chest. Victor kept smiling and talking over me like I was a dog he was training. I told him to stop kissing their asses. He grabbed my arm and hissed that I was going to cost him money. I yanked away and told him if money mattered that much, he could go babysit influencers himself. He called me ungrateful, said I should be happy to have work, said I was making the doc look bad on camera. I snapped back that they were the ones trespassing and harassing people, and he was standing there selling me out for tips. They loved it. You could see it. They kept the phones up, catching every ugly angle, every swear word, hoping I'd give them something they could edit into a villain. I went home with that canal film feeling stuck to my skin, washed my hands until they cracked, still smelled that rotten wet thing when I breathed into my palm. I tried to sleep, and my brain kept replaying the machete crack and the way their laughter died like a switch. The first message was a photo of my back while I was loading a family, taken from far away, like someone was on another boat watching. I blocked the number, and a new one hit immediately. Same photos, like blocking was a joke. That night my phone started blowing up with messages from an unknown number. Photos of me at the dock. Close-ups taken from across the canal. A final video clip. My section of boats after closing, empty, and someone whispering my name from behind the camera. After that clip, I checked my door lock 3 times, then sat in the dark with my phone face down like it could bite me. I quit 2 days later. I don't work water anymore. I don't even like toy aisles because every time I see a doll's face, I remember that wet slop on the guy's wrist and how fast laughter turns into panic when something stops being content. I signed up to help a local arts group restore pieces on the canal because they promised lunch and a certificate I could use for school credit. I packed gloves, a mask, and a small toolkit, and my plan was to spend a few hours cleaning debris on the doll island, take some photos for the organizer, then ride back before the afternoon crowds. I kept my phone in a zip bag because the humidity kills everything. I didn't go because I love creepy shit. I went because I was short on hours, short on cash, and tired of feeling like the only person who couldn't keep life stacked neatly. The organizer sold it as local culture and community care with that bright, rehearsed voice people use when they're trying to make you feel guilty for hesitating. 2 other volunteers showed and treated it like a field trip. One guy had a chest cam and kept saying content like he was already editing the video in his head. The other one, a girl in spotless white sneakers, kept giggling and asking if the dolls move at night. We met at a busted dock behind a cafe. The boards were slick and it smelled like fryer oil mixed with algae. She handed out trash grabbers and contractor bags and made us sign a waiver on a clipboard with old rain stains. Her speech was all smiles until she pointed at a hut set a little back from the path. "Don't go near that," she said. "Caretaker doesn't like it." The girl laughed about a swamp witch. The organizer didn't laugh back. She repeated it slower, eyes hard, like she was warning us about a live wire. The boat was a flat little thing with bench seats, paint peeling, motor coughing. It smelled like fuel and wet rope. We pushed off, and the canal looked normal for a minute. Muddy water, reeds, beer cans, a half-sunk shopping cart. Then the trees leaned in, the air got heavy, and everything started smelling like warm rot. The chest cam guy filmed every dead fish along the shoreline and made jokes. I told him to stop filming people without asking. He rolled his eyes. We snapped at each other in that tight, mean way strangers do when they've decided they're not going to like each other. The island showed up around a bend, and it didn't look like a quirky landmark. It looked like someone dumped 1,000 thrift store nightmares into a swamp and then kept coming back to add more. Dolls everywhere, not arranged neatly, packed into trees and boards and wire like someone had a problem they worked out with staples. Some were nailed to plywood like trophies. Some hung by their necks on twisted wire, faces turned the wrong way, hair matted into ropes. Some were just bodies with missing heads, arms snapped off, torsos split open. Flies crawled in and out of empty eye sockets. Spiderwebs stitched faces shut. The mud was full of little plastic fingers like somebody spilled a bag of them and didn't bother picking them up. We stepped off and my shoes sank with that sucking sound. We started with the easy stuff, picking trash, tightening loose wire, removing broken glass. I used pliers to grab bottle shards so I wouldn't slice my hands. I twisted wire back around branches so dolls wouldn't fall into the water. I filled 2 bags with wet garbage that slapped my knees when I walked. The chest cam guy kept posing next to the worst dolls, grinning, leaning in like he wanted a doll's face in his frame. I told him to knock it off. He told me to stop acting like his mom. I told him to stop acting like a fucking toddler. The girl kept complaining about her shoes and the smell and how this wasn't what the flyer promised. The organizer tried to keep everything upbeat and failed. The smell got worse the longer we stayed. Not just stagnant water. Sweet rot, warm garbage, canal sludge. My mask helped until it got damp and started tasting like the place. Every time the wind shifted, flies smacked my cheeks. I wiped my mouth with the back of my glove and hated myself for it. The organizer hovered near the hut like she was guarding it. And every time one of us drifted that direction, she redirected us with forced cheer. Then I saw a doll head half buried in mud near the hut, face up like it was staring at the sky. Something in my brain snagged on it. It wasn't even curiosity. It was that dumb need to fix the thing that looks wrong. I told myself I'd just pick it up and toss it in the trash pile. I stepped off the path. The mud grabbed my boot and I had to yank it free. The organizer snapped my name sharp. I ignored her, already pissed at being treated like an idiot. And because the chest cam guy was making little haunted hut noises behind her, I knelt, grabbed the head by the hair, and the back of it crumbled in my palm. It wasn't hollow. It was packed. Maggots spilled out, fat and pale, writhing in a wet clump like a living handful of rice. They dropped onto my glove and started crawling for the seams. I jerked back so hard I fell on my ass in the mud. The mask sucked in my mouth with my breath, and I almost choked. My stomach tried to flip inside out. The chest cam guy laughed until the smell hit him. Then he gagged so hard he bent over, hands on his knees. The girl backed up fast, slipped, caught herself, started swearing like she'd just remembered she could. The organizer stormed over and grabbed my arm. I yanked away and told her to get the fuck off me. She snapped that I'd been told, that I disrespected the site, that I was jeopardizing the relationship. I stared at her like she was insane. You're more worried about your relationship with a doll island than the fact I just pulled a nest of living worms out of a head. I threw the head away. It landed behind the hut with a wet smack, and that's when I saw a pile of parts one hadn't noticed. A deliberate pile tucked behind the hut like somebody had been collecting broken pieces and hiding them from the main path. Tiny hands, tiny shoes, doll torsos split open and packed with old weeds and feathers like nests. Plastic faces stacked like masks. Hair ripped out in clumps and tangled around nails. Some bodies had wires shoved inside them like someone tried to give them bones. It looked maintained, not abandoned. Like somebody came back and rearranged it when things slid around. Then I heard a child crying. Not from the canal, not echoing from boats. Right behind the hut, close and muffled like someone sobbing in a fabric. It wasn't movie crying. It sounded tired, hoarse, like somebody had been doing a long time. My stomach dropped, and I stood up fast, heart hammering, scanning the trees, because an actual kid out here would be a whole different emergency. The crying stopped the moment I moved. Silence snapped in hard. Even the other volunteers shut up. The organizer's face went pale in a way that pissed me off, because it meant she'd heard it before or expected it. I walked toward the hut door anyway. She grabbed my arm again, nails digging through my sleeve, and hissed one sharp command. Stop. I yanked away, angry, and that's when the hut door creaked open from the inside. A man stepped out. Older, sun-worn, eyes flat. Not a performer. Not an actor. He stared at my hands like he could smell what I touched. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He just looked at me with disgust and pointed at the canal with a slow, steady finger. Get off. The organizer started apologizing over herself, fast and desperate. The chest cam guy lifted his camera like he might film and then lowered it like it suddenly weighed a ton. The girl stood frozen, lips parted, tears starting without sound. I wanted to demand to know what was behind him. I wanted to scream that if there was a kid in there, we were calling someone right now. But I looked at his face and I didn't feel brave. I felt like I'd stepped into someone else's rules and he'd been enforcing them a long time. And I hated that my brain went there, but the crying didn't feel like a kid you rescue by being loud. It felt like bait. We left fast, not a dramatic sprint, but that quick, tense walk where nobody wants to turn their back and nobody wants to be the last one off the island. The mud sucked at our shoes like it didn't want to let go. Dolls swung slightly as we brushed past, wire creaking, little plastic feet tapping wood. On the boat back, nobody joked anymore. The organizer and the chest cam guy started arguing in low, nasty bursts. He blamed her for not warning us. She blamed him for filming and acting like an asshole. And the girl snapped that she wanted her fucking certificate and she was going to report this whole thing. The organizer told her to shut up. The girl told her to choke on her lunch. I just sat there staring at my gloves because they felt wrong on my skin, like they were still full of maggots. Back at the dock, I didn't wait for the paperwork. I walked straight to a public bathroom and washed my hands until the skin burned. Soap, rinse soap again. I scraped under my nails with a key. I still smelled it. Sweet rot and canal sludge. It clung to me like a film. That night, I scrubbed my hands raw, nails digging into my palms, and I still smelled the rot when I brought food near my face. I kept checking my cuticles like I expected something to crawl out. For weeks after, I kept hearing that crying in quiet rooms. Not loud, not dramatic, just a soft, exhausted sob that starts the second everything goes still, like the island taught my brain a new sound, and now it won't shut up. I took the Xochimilco dive job because tourists drop phones and wallets in the canal, and someone always pays to get them back. I packed a wetsuit, a cheap dive mask, a rope, and a magnet stick, and my plan was to do 2 quick retrievals near the main routes and go home before the evening boats started blasting music. I went with my cousin as a spotter because the water is filthy and you don't dive alone. I ate nothing before leaving because I didn't want to throw up in my mask. At the docks, you get hit with diesel, wet wood, stale beer, and that canal stink that doesn't rinse off. People laugh on the colorful boats while trash slides along the banks and dogs pick at it. I've pulled out enough stuff to know the bottom is a junk drawer, and sometimes it feels like the junk is the point. My cousin rode with me because he doesn't trust me to say no. We argued the whole drive, quick and mean, because he wanted the main loops and I wanted the money. He said the Doll Island area always turns wrong, like the sound dies and you can't tell what's imagination and what's under you. I told him he was letting tourist stories get into his head. He told me he'd rather sound like a coward than watch me come up blue. A young guy met us at the dock, frantic, saying his girlfriend dropped a necklace near the Doll Island turn. He showed me a blurry phone video, pointed at the water like it was a crime scene, and shoved cash into my hand. I didn't love the location, but money doesn't care what you love. He wouldn't describe the necklace beyond silver and small, and he kept hovering over my rope like he wanted to make sure it stayed on me. When I asked why his girlfriend wasn't there, he shrugged and snapped that she was too upset, then immediately went back to smiling at strangers like nothing happened. We motored out. The closer we got to the island, the quieter the canal felt, like the trees muffled everything. I could still see other boats, but their music faded into a dull thump and then nothing. Even the water under the shade went darker and flatter, like it got heavier. The young guy stopped talking and kept his phone in his hand, screen dark, thumb resting on it like a trigger. Then the dolls came into view, hundreds of them hanging from branches, limp and staring, some missing eyes, some missing faces, all of them pointed toward the water like witnesses. The wind made them knock together in slow clicks. Some were tied with wire, so tight their plastic necks bowed. A few had marker scribbles on their cheeks, names and dates smeared by rain. There were fresh ones too, bright store dolls already stained brown, like the island pulled the color out of them fast. My cousin told me to turn around. I told him to hold the boat steady and stop acting dramatic. He snapped back that he wasn't dragging my ass out if I got tangled. Not for a necklace we hadn't even seen. That pissed me off because it sounded like he'd already pictured the headline. The young guy sat there quiet, staring past us at the water like he was waiting for a result, and that calm didn't match the frantic boyfriend act from 10 minutes earlier. I suited up anyway. My cousin tied the rope around my waist, tested it, gave me a thumbs up. I checked the knot myself because I don't trust anything completely out there. I slipped in and the water closed over my head, cold and thick. Visibility went to nothing. I could see my own hands, and that was it. My boots hit bottom and sank into mud like it wanted to keep them. Every step made a suction pop. The water had this pressure to it, like it pushed back when I moved. I started sweeping the magnet stick and feeling my way through the soft mess. I touched glass. I touched slimy wood. I touched rubber. I found a fork and a bent nail and a chunk of chain that went nowhere. My glove snagged on fishing line, and I had to peel it off my fingers one loop at a time, breathing hard so I wouldn't panic. I brushed something that felt like hair and yanked back hard. I kept moving because stopping in that water makes your brain invent things. My hand hit metal. Thin chain. I got a grip, tugged, and felt resistance like it was snagged under something heavy. I pulled again, and the rope at my waist went tight as my cousin braced. The chain came loose with a sudden jerk, and my hand shot upward. Something grabbed my wrist. Not a fish nibble. Not weeds. A full grip, fingers closing, squeezing bone. It wasn't random pressure. It was a hold, placed right where you can control someone. The squeeze settled into the joints like it knew exactly where to clamp, and I felt this sharp sting shoot up my arm like a nail. Panic punched through me, and I kicked upward, yanking hard, and the grip slipped off like it slid through mud. I thrashed toward the light. I couldn't really see, lungs burning, mind screaming. I broke the surface coughing, ripping my mask off, sucking air like I'd been held under. My cousin hauled me closer to the boat, eyes wide, asking what happened. I couldn't explain without sounding insane, and I couldn't handle being argued with while I was shaking, so I just climbed in and dumped what I'd retrieved onto the wood. The rope burned my waist as it tightened, and my wrist screamed when I put weight on it. The chain wasn't a necklace. It was attached to a doll. Small, bloated, waterlogged, hair stuck to its face in ropes. Its eyes were half missing, and its mouth had been chewed open by something. The doll's fabric belly had split, and inside were tiny bones. Fish bones, maybe, or something smaller, packed in tight like someone stuffed it on purpose. The stink hit, and my cousin stepped back like it burned him. I peeled my glove off, and my wrist was already swelling, bruises blooming in the shape of fingers, with a deeper spot at the thumb like pressure had twisted me. We hauled back to the dock fast. On the way, he kept trying to talk it down into something normal. Wire root? Me yanking too hard and smashing myself. I kept staring at the marks. I could still feel that squeeze in my joints, like the bones remembered it. The young guy finally started talking again, telling us to hurry, saying people don't like you messing around by the island. I asked who didn't like it. He didn't answer. The young guy at the dock didn't want it. He backed away like it was radioactive and started yelling that it wasn't his. He swore he never owned a doll. He demanded his money back. My cousin started arguing with him, and I snapped and told both of them to shut up because my wrist still hurt and I could still feel that grip. The guy's story kept changing while he yelled. Girlfriend, sister, friend. Every version had the same ending. Give him his cash. My cousin called him a liar and stepped forward. The guy stepped forward too, chest out like he wanted to make it physical, and I had to grab my cousin's shirt and yank him back. People started watching. Somebody laughed. Somebody filmed. A boatman yelled that we were bad for business. The young guy kept pointing at the canal like it was evidence and not a sewer, like he could shout his way into making the doll not real. I didn't want the doll near me anymore. I grabbed the chain with my good hand, held it away from my body, and walked to the edge. My cousin told me not to touch it. The young guy made a move like he was going to stop me, and then froze, like he remembered he didn't want to be seen touching it either. I told them both to fuck off, and I threw it. We threw the doll back in the canal. It didn't sink right away. It floated beside the boat, face up, staring like it was deciding. The water barely moved. It just sat there, calm, as if it knew time didn't matter down there. My cousin started the motor to leave, and the wake rocked it, but it stayed close like it had weight and will. Then it rolled once and slipped under, slow and smooth, like it finally made a choice. My cousin drove us home with his jaw clenched. We fought again in the car, not loud, just sharp. He wanted me to admit it was a snag so we could forget it. I wanted him to admit he saw the bruise, and that meant something. When he said maybe my brain filled in the grip because I was scared, I almost hit him. Instead, I got out of my place without saying goodbye. At home, I scrubbed my hands until my knuckles burned. I soaked my suit in bleach, and the water still looked dirty. I kept checking my wrist like it might change its mind and disappear. It didn't. It darkened. 5 distinct bruises, like someone left a signature. I tried to sleep and kept jerking awake, hearing that dull click of dolls hitting wood in my head. Around midnight, my cousin texted me a single line telling me to go to a clinic for infection, then another line saying he was sorry, then nothing. That night, I found wet fingerprints on my bathroom mirror, small, smeared like a child's hand dragged down the glass. My wrist had bruises shaped like fingers. And every time I closed my eyes, I saw that doll floating beside the boat, patient, like it knew where I lived now.